adherence for users, especially for people who struggle with taking a pill every day or making frequent clinic visits.
And lastly, a civil defense official in Gaza says at least 7 people have been killed by Israeli forces in 2 separate incidents. A Hamas spokesperson called the incidents a violation of the ceasefire. The second phase of U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan remains uncertain, but Trump said he will decide what he thinks is right on whether there should be a two-state solution in the Middle East. UNICEF spokesperson Ricardo Pierre says rebuilding will be a huge effort.
Fixing and starting to rebuild the infrastructure that was destroyed, the lives of children that have been absolutely affected in a very destructive way. They've lost parents, they've been orphaned, they've lost loved ones, they've lost their homes, their schools, they've been killed and maimed at a scale that we haven't seen recently in many conflicts. The task is colossal.
And recapping on your top stories, members of parliament in Madagascar's National Assembly have voted to impeach President Andre Rajoelina by 130 yes votes to 1 blank ballot. Channel Africa News, I'm Oneli Nsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, so we'll take you into South Africa's $12 billion sports market, and then Tottenham Hotspur announcing a new $133 million cash injection. We'll tell you more at the bottom of the hour.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A very good afternoon to you, Senegal. Good afternoon, Kenya, Côte d'Ivoire. Good afternoon, Egypt, Tunisia. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. This is your Tuesday edition. I'm Thami Ngubeni. Coming up for you this afternoon, we'll take a look at Kenya's parliament. They've passed a new bill to regulate digital assets like cryptocurrency. We'll be in conversation this afternoon with Kenyan economist Francis Sang. Also, you'll remember that we did cover this quite extensively, and that is the 13th Pan-African Conference on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation. Now, so big an issue is this, so big a concern is tax justice on the African continent, that on the backdrop of that, there's the African Parliamentary Network on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation Continental Conference, and that is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. We'll shine a spotlight on that gathering. And do remember to continue interacting with us on all our various social media platforms on X, Instagram and YouTube. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook we are at Channel Africa.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
We begin here this afternoon. The South African small, medium businesses say they want to explore the export market. However, they don't know how to go about reaching that market. This came out of the Export Expo Symposium held by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition in Midrand, north of Johannesburg. The department's Deputy Minister, Zuko Kolimpi, says the department is doing all it can to assist exporters and those who are keen to export, but more still needs to be done. Notando Makutulela reports.
The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, Deputy Minister Zuko Kolimpi, says the Export Expo comes at a time when South Africa is at an economic and trade crossroad. This as the United States President Donald Trump imposed a 30% tariff on all South African goods exported to the US, with some exemptions. Kotlimpi says this move has threatened over 30,000 jobs and risked a fallout on long-term relationships. Kotlimpi says while this is the case, this tragedy opens up opportunities for small businesses to tap into the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. He says this will grow trade between South Africa and its neighboring countries. Kotlimpi says this is because the export market is critical to the country's economic growth as it guarantees jobs, industrialization, and the future prosperity of millions of South Africans.
As a general rule, export-led growth creates a virtuous cycle. When our companies export, they learn to meet international quality standards, they adopt cutting-edge technologies and innovate constantly. Export-oriented firms pay higher wages, invest more in training, and create higher quality jobs. They generate the foreign exchange we need for critical imports and help stabilize our currency. A strong export sector is fundamental to everything else we want to achieve as a nation.
Thank you.
One exhibitor at the expo, Sijeng Noche, owner and founder of Seated by Jenki, says she wants to expand her business to North Africa but lacks the know-how.
We do have big ambitions to export. We think our products are good quality and things the export market would definitely enjoy. However, we haven't received enough information on how to get into the exporting market. We'd like to also do e-commerce via e-commerce marketplaces, via Amazon, selling overseas also to the USA market. But we do have a big interest in the Africa market because we think they'll definitely enjoy our products.
Anton Kotsia, founder of Medical Device Manufacturers, says Africa needs to get its own standardization to diversify exports, just as South Africa did with the South African Bureau of Standards.
We know of the CE mark. All you need to do is look at how many products have a CE mark on it. And CE doesn't stand for Chinese export. It stands for Certificate European. And what we need to do is we need to create an African version of the same trademark. Like we have an SABS trademark. We want a similar value proposition for products that are made in Africa. And it's not just medical devices, it's cosmetics, it's cosmeceuticals, it's herbal products, which is called complementary medicines. These are areas where African manufacturers are very strong. They believe in herbal remedies, but in order to export them from one country to another is problematic.
Meanwhile, the department says it has developed a butterfly strategy which aims to diversify the markets for South African goods. It says this strategy is a call to action. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
It is exactly 13 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we turn our sights now to Kenya, where the parliament has passed a bill to regulate digital assets like cryptocurrencies. This East African country is positioning itself to become a major hub for digital finance, as well as to boost investments in that sector by establishing clear rules for the emerging industry. The chairperson of the Finance Committee in the National Assembly, Kuria Kimani, urged President William Ruto to sign the bill into law, as Kenya was one step away from joining the likes of South Africa to become the only African nation with laws to govern the digital assets industry. For more on this, we joined on the line by Kenyan economist Francis Sang. Francis, a very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you for having me.
So, Francis, could this bill that set out to regulate digital assets be one of the efforts by Kenya to address the grey listing by the Financial Action Task Force?
Yes, it's part of it. But when you look at it in broader terms, many Kenyans already invest in crypto assets. So this bill was needed like yesterday, but I agree it's part of the term also to monitor. And to monitor AML and counter-terrorism financing issues.
Now, if you look at the reasoning behind this law, it is to provide legal clarity for digital assets. But how do you strike that balance, though, between clarity and interference in the virtual asset space?
Yeah, to provide clarity, the main aim is for consumer protection, because currently, like in the Kenyan market, many consumers have been conned through schemes that look like these tech schemes and digital currency schemes, but you find that people are being put into things that are just out there, that are fictitious, then people lose money. So by the government coming in, one of the main aims for consumer protection, and also to provide consumer protection, will provide assurance in the industry. Once you provide assurance, it will attract more investors into that space, which already very many Kenyans are investing in that space, even before the regulations have come into place.
I am going to ask Francis if we can just take you back to our production team so we can try and call you back and have you on a better line, so we're better actually able to hear you. Our apologies for that. So that's Francis Sang. He's an economist based in Kenya, and we'll be touching base with him once again in just a moment to get greater clarity on this bill. Well, it's a law right now, but once it's passed, it's a bill right now rather, but once it does become law, how is it going to roll out? Who is going to regulate it? And are these efforts enough in order to address those issues of grey listing that Kenya had faced? It's exactly 17 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Do stay with Africa in Business.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter?
Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard?
Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126.
And we will call you back.
So you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am,
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views.
Share your opinion.
Engage with a community that values your perspective.
Follow us on our social media.
Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za
and get ready to share your views
on Channel Africa,
the African perspective. Channel Africa, your voice, your sound, and your home. Stay logged right here.
It is 18 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. We continue our conversation with Kenyan economist Francis Sang. Francis, just before we ended our chat a moment ago, I was wondering, it is a bill right now. And when President Ruto does sign it into law, which entity will have the regulatory authority over the digital assets?
There are two entities, sir. It will be a sort of a dual regulation, because the two entities that will regulate the industry are the Central Bank of Kenya and the Capital Markets Authority. Now, the purpose of the Central Bank of Kenya will be to license and to oversee the issuance of the coins, while the Capital Markets Authority will license and regulate the exchanges and the trading platforms that will be used for trading in the digital assets.
What are the back-end, side effects of widespread adoption of crypto or stable coins in Kenya? Could they possibly pose systemic risks in the country's banking system?
Yes, now that is something the government needs to look at. It will pose a risk, but it also provides an opportunity. It provides an opportunity in terms, because it gives now another asset class in terms of investment, because the digital assets like the coins, they are like currency, but they're also like investment products, because their value changes over time. So it brings a risk, but also you have to look at what percentage of digital coins compared to other investment platforms that are in the industry. So also that risk gives an opportunity.
So it certainly is an area that they'll have to tighten up quite closely and observe. We do know that cryptocurrencies are usually used for cross-border transactions. What are the international regulatory cooperation mechanisms that need to be in place in order for this law to be effective?
Okay, what the government has done in order not to veer off how because internationally crypto is being regulated. For example, in Britain, crypto is being regulated, and this law that has been passed by Parliament is heavily borrowed from the British law on crypto regulation. And some of the aspects is that these virtual asset service providers must have strong anti-money laundering and CFT policies. They must have a physical presence in the country. And this is also because of what I mentioned earlier in terms of consumer protection and also having a recourse who do you run to when things go south. So it's heavily borrowed, and it's in operation just like what Britain, the US, and I believe South Africa have done in their law in terms of implementation.
Francis Sang, we thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Very much appreciated, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a Kenyan economist, Francis Sang, on the developments being made in the country in order to regulate cryptocurrency, really positioning themselves as a major hub for digital finance transactions. Takes us to 22 minutes after 4 p.m.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa. Now, the African Parliamentary Network on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation Continental Conference is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. The conference brings together parliamentarians, policymakers, as well as experts from across the continent to reflect on the progress that has been made and also to explore ways to strengthen Africa's fight against illicit financial flows. The event comes at the back of the just concluded 13th Pan-African Conference on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation. You'll remember that we covered that quite extensively here on Africa in Business. But to turn our focus now once again to the Tax Justice Network Africa, which is TJNA's Executive Director, Ms. Chennai Mukumba. Very good afternoon. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So what are the key progress that has been made by the African continent in tackling illicit financial flows over the past decade? I think just looking at the events that we've been having back to back, focusing specifically on tax justice, it shows just what a critical concern it is for the continent.
Yeah, so I would say there's three things, right? The first is that over the past 10 years, we've been able to really profile the magnitude and seriousness of the loss of illicit financial flows from the continent. So prior to the publication of the report we were celebrating last week, there was almost no recognition of the fact that as a continent, we were losing all of these resources. And it was primarily due to the practices of multinational corporations on the continent, right? So the first thing that the report did was flag this as a mainstream issue that we need to all address. The second is that it really started to get governments to think through what are some of the national reforms they need to take, right, in order to address the loss of resources. And so we started to see many governments strengthen their tax administrations, strengthen some of their legislation to make it more difficult, right, for private companies, private multinational enterprises to sort of funnel resources outside of the continent, resources that we could use for our development, right? And then the third sort of big success here was the way in which the Africa Group 2-3 years ago was able to start a conversation about how all countries must be involved in the development of tax rules at the international level, right? So right now we've got a small group of particularly wealthy countries that determine these rules and set rules that are quite difficult for African countries to meet, right? And so make us vulnerable to sort of abusive practices. And so this work by the Africa Group really has set us on a path to start to redefine the kinds of rules that govern the international tax system.
And how is APNIFT helping to turn political will into concrete action? Because, you know, the will can be there, but only when you actually act upon it are you able to make sizable changes.
So APNIFT is our sort of Pan-African continental network for members of parliament, right? And so one of the things that we saw as particularly important when thinking about addressing the loss of these resources was not just sort of the technical work that needs to be done, right? But the way in which our politicians were able to hold to account, right, all of these different actors. And so we've seen some of our active APNIFT national caucuses question their executives, right? So, for example, what is your IFF strategy, right? Or are you participating in the global tax rules? Or this contract that you've signed with this large multinational company, to what extent is it going to truly benefit citizens as opposed to sort of see resources be funneled out? And so we've got many country case studies where we've seen this incredible work being done across the continent.
So if we look at the work that you are doing, right, and we look at APNIFT as well, and the just concluded 13th Pan-African Conference on Illicit Financial Flows and Taxation, do you find that there's a lot of duplication there of topic, of concepts, of resolutions, or is there a sense of progression from one conference to another, a sense of synergy perhaps?
So it's actually a sense of synergy. What we did with our Pan-African conference that we, sort of fondly call the PAC, is really use that as an opportunity to bring right to the forefront the importance of this conversation. And so it was incredible for us to have, a former president, Thabo Mbeki, join us, as well as some of the high-level panel members that were responsible of this work 10 years ago. And what we did in that conversation is sort of talk through what's happened, but also start to conceptualize what do we want to do moving forward, right? So the audience of that particular conversation was civil society organizations, activists, academics, right? And some of these sort of high-level politicians that were part of that conversation. The meeting we're having this week, right, is now, so what next, right? We've had these conversations. Who are the people that are now going to take it to the level at which it begins to actually influence policy reform? So with this meeting, we're talking to members of parliament and saying, when you go back to your countries, right, off the back of conversations we've had last week and this week, ask these questions, right? Call these people to account, ask for these documents, right? So now this is actually where we're seeing the people with influence, right, begin to start the ball rolling in terms of action.
And that's the important part, the action after the resolutions, the action
exactly.
after the conversations. Thank you very much, Chinai, for putting all of that into perspective. Maybe just throwing forward and looking forward, maybe for the rest of this year and early parts of 2026, what other, conferences or meetings are there going to be around the area of illicit financial flows and taxation that deal specifically on the African continent?
So the next big meeting that we're really trying to garner support and public awareness around is a meeting that's going to be taking place in November in Nairobi. And so, as I mentioned, right, some of the work that's been sort of spearheaded by the Africa Group is this discussion on reform of the global tax system. And what they're trying to do is see how we can shift where those conversations happen from the OECD, right, to the United Nations. And the thinking being here that at the UN, one country has one vote, regardless of size, right, regardless of economic development, we must be able to have a say. So in November, there is going to be over sort of a period of 2 weeks, a continuation of those negotiations, right? And so we're really encouraging African governments to make sure that they have one or two negotiators in those meetings, right, to influence that decision making, because we're actually seeing now the conversations that normally happen in New York happen in Nairobi on the African continent. And it's a real opportunity for us to push our agenda to curb IFFs.
Great progress there, because geography does matter. We thank you so much, Ms. Chinai Mukumba, for that.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That was TJNA's Executive Director, Chinai Mukumba, for the focus on illicit financial flows. And that meeting that's going to be taking place in November, also a very key one to tackle this challenge. It's gone exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time. Let's take you now to the market desk, where Chanduko Legege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. 1 US dollar is trading at 17.32 in South Africa. In Botswana, 13 Pula 21. Namibia, 17 Namibian dollars 32. Zambia, 22 Kwacha 61. Kenya, the dollar is 128 shillings 736. Ethiopia, 146 bih 708. Uganda, 3,000 shilling 405. Tanzania, 2,000 shilling 443. 1 US dollar in Nigeria is 1,460 naira. Egypt, the dollar is 47 Egyptian pound 63. Tunisia, 2 dinar 92. Algeria, 129 dinar 26. Morocco, 90 ram 19. Angola, 912 kwanza. The Congolese franc is 2,364 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is $4,116. Platinum at $1,615 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $62.37 a barrel. That's all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And from the sporting desk with the business of sport, a very good afternoon to you, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the sports desk. So a surge in commercial partnerships, a rising domestic investment, as well as growing audiences are driving noticeable growth in sports economies in several African countries. So beyond a stage where star athletes are sourced, Africa is rapidly becoming a platform for sports tourism, investment, as well as innovation. Now, the African sports market is now estimated at $12 billion, according to consulting firm Oliver Wyne, with projections showing it could surpass $20 billion by 2035, driven, of course, by rising sponsorships, media rights, as well as event revenues. So according to Herman Okendo, a Nairobi-based sports journalist, as well as a sports merchandise investor, he says there is a clear shift towards business-focused sporting activities. Now, he also said that even at the grassroots level, they are seeing corporates from businesses, betting companies, and other channeling resources into the sports economy. Now, a potential of Africa's sports economy is best evidenced in countries like Rwanda, which is aggressively now pursuing business opportunities in the global sports sector. Just last week, the Rwanda Development Board, through its tourism arm Visit Rwanda, unveiled a new multi-year sponsorship deal with the LA Clippers in the NBA, as well as the Los Angeles Rams in the NFL, marking the first time an African tourism brand has simultaneously partnered with top-tier American basketball and football franchises. Now, the deal gives Visit Rwanda exclusive jersey patch rights with the Clippers, and as well as the official sponsorship status of the Rams, SoFi Stadium, as well as the Hollywood Park. It also includes entitlement rights to two premium spaces inside SoFi Stadium, alongside digital branding on the venue's massive infinity screen, as well as the LED displays during games. Well, the Zambian government has suspended funding for the Zambian national soccer team after poor results. Now, the Football Association of Zambia, also known as FAS, has given an ultimatum to provide a detailed justification as to why the government should continue funding the association, and also explain measures being taken to improve the senior men's national football team's performance. In a letter circulated to the media, government, through the Ministry of Youth, Sport and Arts, suspended government financial support to FAS over the senior men's national team's continued poor performance in recent international matches, including, of course, the World Cup qualifiers. So Zambia this past Sunday lost to Nigeria by a goal to nil at the Levi Mwanawasa Stadium in a Group E World Cup qualifier, and they've now failed to qualify for next year's FIFA World Cup. Further afield now, Tottenham Hotspur have announced a new $133 million capital injection as the Lewis family reiterated their long-term commitment to the club. In a statement released earlier last week, the club stated that the equity release will further strengthen the club's financial position and also equip the club's leadership team with additional resources to continue to focus on driving long-term sporting success. It follows from last month's $120 million financial deal with the Macquarie Group, and as part of the ownership's latest efforts to reaffirm their long and ongoing commitment to the club and also accelerate Spurs' ability to compete for the biggest trophies. Now, former Manchester City financial advisor Stefan Bosson explains what this injection means for Tottenham Hotspur.
They needed cash. They did a £90 million acceleration of some of the TV money. So they went to Macquarie earlier in the summer and brought forward some of the payments that will be made over this season from the Premier League, so that they will have effectively paid a small amount to bring forward that cash. And so the cash that they've then raised here is on top of that. So they've raised something like, in total, £190 million of cash. That does not mean, first of all, it's not a PSR issue. You have to separate cash from PSR earnings. But interestingly, it probably actually increases the ownership of ENIC in the club.
And finally, Lionel Messi has made contradictory statements about his involvement in Mass Plus by Messi Hydration Drinks, rival company of Prime Hydration, alleges in a false advertising complaint found last week in Florida in the USA against the Inter Miami as well as Argentina national team superstar. And Mass Plus next generation beverage company, so Prime Hydration, which was founded by a group that includes influencers including Logan Paul as well as Oliheji William, contend that Messi has described his role with Mess Plus in conflicting as well as unlawful ways to further legal as well as business interest. Now, the Mass Plus website says Messi is the founder of the drink. Well, that concludes your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you to the markets and sporting desk. We'll be bringing you more of that within the Africa in Business SOT tomorrow. But for now, there are calls for stronger financial support to turn South Africa's Vision 2040 for conservation into reality. That's taking centre stage this week. The message came out on the sidelines of the G20 Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group meetings, which are currently underway in Cape Town, South Africa. That's where the Worldwide Fund for Nature hosted a dialogue on financing a new vision for conservation in South Africa. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange attended the side event and filed this report.
As global leaders deliberate on environmental priorities at the G20 meetings, parallel discussions are taking place on how to mobilize the financial resources needed to sustain South Africa's natural heritage. The Worldwide Fund for Nature, or WWF South Africa, led one of these key dialogues, focusing on Vision 2040, a national blueprint aimed at integrating conservation into economic development. WWF South Africa CEO Dr. Monet du Plessis said turning this vision into reality will require practical action and strong financial commitment.
WWF, which I speak for, was inspired by Vision 2040, which is not only bold, it's necessary, and we committed to contribute to making it a reality. I look forward to a rich and constructive discussion on how we can get practical about realizing this vision. As you will have heard people say, conservation without money remains conversation. that's what we want to address today.
Speaking at the event, Dr. Howard Hendricks, Managing Executive for Conservation Services at South African National Parks, said Vision 2040 seeks to create living landscapes that link conservation, communities, and the economy.
So when Vision 2040 was thought about, it was based on those deep-root challenges in the country. And Vision 2040, as much as we will continue to expand our conservation estate, we have to create living landscapes that connect people with nature and with economies. And therefore, where the financing comes in is that financing Vision 2040 is all about investing in the long-term resilience of our environment, but also with the livelihoods of people.
Meanwhile, Nokutula Mene, project management specialist at the United Nations Development Programme, stressed that biodiversity should be treated as a national economic asset rather than a luxury.
South Africa's biodiversity is not only just a nice to have. I'd like to put the case that it is actually an economic asset. Our ecosystems generate almost $500 million each year, which is about 6% of our GDP. And our ecosystems sustain agriculture, water security, rural livelihoods, and underpin a multi-billion-dollar tourism industry. And yet, for some reason, biodiversity has not gained the status of an asset class. For many, it remains something nice to look at.
Mene also warned that funding for biodiversity has been on the decline, which could undermine both environmental and economic resilience if not urgently addressed.
We've actually shown that our biodiversity expenditure has declined in the recent years, even as our global biodiversity framework has become more ambitious. This means our financing gap is going to be larger than what it was in 2018. If left unaddressed, this shortfall will erode our natural capital that underpins both our growth and fiscal stability.
Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Cape Town, South Africa.
We retain our focus on environmental and climate sustainability issues as we turn our focus now to NEPAD as the global leaders prepare together for the G20 summit in South Africa next month. Can you believe it? It's just a month away. It seems like yesterday that we were talking about November, but November is literally just around the corner. And slightly because of this, the stakes are very high. Africa's call is very simple. Let the green transition be fair. Let the financing be just, and let development remain at the center of the climate agenda. Speaking to the media, African Union Development Agency says this is not just about cutting emissions. It's about survival, development, and justice. Dimakatso Leshuru has that report.
Despite contributing less than 4% of global emissions, Africa bears the brunt of climate disasters, droughts, floods, and heat waves that threaten livelihoods and food security. Yet, the promised climate financing from wealthy nations remains far below what's needed. Ambassador Ali Mohammed, Kenya's Special Envoy for Climate Change, explains.
Climate change is a developmental agenda, and it is important that Africa is given the opportunity and the space to continue developing like the rest of the world. As you've heard, the emissions from this continent are insignificant. We are 1.5 billion population, yet it's only 4% that we are contributing. And we suffer the most. We are among the most vulnerable countries or regions in the world.
At the heart of the debate is climate finance, the money meant to help developing countries transition to clean energy. African negotiators say they are still waiting for rich countries to deliver on their promises. Less than 12% of Africa's climate financing needs are currently being met each year, forcing countries to borrow at a high cost to go green. Keriako Tobika is Special Advisor on Climate Change to the CEO at the AU NEPAD.
The debt is made worse, of course, by the cost of capital. And unless till we are able to access financing at a reasonable price and cost, this debt accumulation will continue to grow. And the debt situation is also made worse by climate change. You know, we invest in infrastructure, for example, because of climate change, is wiped out. And so these investments that we borrow at high cost are often wiped out, just in a spell of a day or because of climate change.
And while Africa is being urged to abandon fossil fuels, the West is quietly doing the opposite. Europe has softened its stance on coal amid energy shortages. The United States continues to approve new oil and gas projects, while its president, the next chair of the G20, denies that climate change exists. Across Africa, the transition to clean energy is already underway. Kenya, Morocco, and South Africa are leading the large-scale solar, wind, and green hydrogen projects, but these efforts need sustainable funding and fair terms.
We often get financing that is 5 to 10% higher than the other, mainly the developed countries and other parts of the world. And this is unfairness. Is something that needs to be redressed and to be re-emphasized every time. An outcome document that's going to come out of South Africa, chairmanship of G20, needs to prioritize and to emphasize the iniquitous financial system that continues to burden Africa through high cost of capital.
Inadequate electrification puts Agenda 2063, Africa's long-term blueprint for growth, at risk of remaining a slogan that will never be realized. Agenda 2063 is about powering industries, creating jobs, and ensuring energy access for hundreds of millions of Africans still living in poverty. African leaders are banking on this G20 taking place in South Africa next month. That's been dubbed Africa's G20 to have an ear of countries from the north that the continent wants to be part of the global solution and will not quietly comply to the green transition at its own expense. Whether the stance will be clearly and audibly articulated as the continent fights for a seat on the table is something else.
For shared prosperity around the world, which is the focus of the G20, it is very critical that rule-based order, multilateral systems, and inclusivity, leaving no one behind, be emphasized.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakazo Leshoro in Johannesburg.
Africa at Play with Neto and ETO Chemane.
I've witnessed something fresh, something exciting, and something very inspirational from the president of the country, William Ruto. Whenever athletes are performing to their best level, he always comes on board to reward those athletes, be it football, be it athletics, and not leaving it up to the sport ministry.
The president realizes that sports is a business, and for that reason, he also reduces the number of people who are jobless, because sports now is such a serious business, and for that reason, commercialization of sports is a major way of improving or increasing employment opportunities for the young people, and that is why the president has been very persistent in trying as much as possible to inspire more sports personalities to reduce the baggage of the people who are struggling to get job opportunities in the country among the young people.
Francis F.M. Mutegi, our correspondent from East Africa in Nairobi, Kenya.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. Let the good times roll. From the 10th of October, make a note. Channel Africa is stepping into a brand new era with the launch of our upgraded website and app. It's easy, fresh, and always on your fingertips. Wherever you are in the world, Africa's voice is just a click away. The future of Channel Africa goes live from the 10th of October. Don't miss the moments.
From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:48 Central African Time. Now this week in our Standard Bank slot, we look at the bank's inaugural Township Informal Economy Report that's just released this very afternoon in South Africa. That's in Soweto. And many of you are probably wondering, yes, we know Soweto, but what does it actually stand for? It actually stands for South Africa's Southwestern Townships. That's what Soweto stands for. And I actually know some who are very disappointed to find out that it's actually just a geographical location, nothing too deep about the name Soweto. So this is where this Township Informal Economy Report was launched earlier on today. Now, Soweto is outside Johannesburg in the Gauteng province. if we take a look at this report, it provides fresh insights into one of South Africa's most dynamic but underserved markets, also a very historic market. The findings reveal that nearly 80% of township businesses remain unregistered. And to delve deeper into this report, we joined this afternoon by Lisiba Matladi, Senior Manager for Enterprise and Supply Development, Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank. Lisiba, good to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon, Thami. How are you?
I'm awesome, thank you. And I must say, I was a bit caught up, when we break down the acronym Soweto, because we don't often do that. But talk to us about the environment today at the launch. And for those who may not ever have been to Soweto, but just have heard about it, because of history or because it's so central to South Africa's economy and development, talk to us about the environment, the buzz, the potential, and why Standard Bank chose to launch it there.
Look, I think Soweto was an ideal place because, as we know, the history of this country really stems mostly from Soweto. It's not only the home of Nelson Mandela, but we had businessmen like Maponya who built the Maponya Mall. There is businesses like the Mike Nkuna businesses that are, being developed in Soweto. And we see a lot of other smaller businesses that are very innovative. So when you talk about the Kasi business hub in this country, so we cannot leave out Soweto and many other, obviously, townships in South Africa that are also representing. But Soweto was ideal to launch this type of work because we could see both worlds, from the smaller informal businesses, the spaza shops, up to the more developed businesses and developing businesses that need bigger solutions and bigger financing requirements.
Right. So let's delve into the report itself. If you could tell us more about that and how it was actually compiled.
Yeah, so the report came about over a year ago where, Standard Bank was doing a lot of work in the township economy. As you know, we've always been present in the township. We've always done things there, and we heard the plea to say, look, the solution needs to be more relevant to us as the people of Kasi. So we wanted to know exactly what is it that township businesses want, what are their challenges, what are they living, their living experiences, and also the opportunities that are presented in the township. And therefore, we couldn't find anything out there that really spoke in detail around these things that we wanted to find out, and hence we commissioned a report, research into the township economy, spoke to the people, heard their cry, their needs, their challenges, and that's what led to it. It was a journey of about 6 months, more or less, where we really went out, understood in 5 provinces, interviewed township entrepreneurs, and came out with the research that we launched today.
And can you take us through the key takeaways from that report?
I think while we all understand that, the township economy has got a huge potential. Look, I think Stats SA has indicated about a 900 billion rand economy that exists in the township. But we went deeper to understanding. So we surveyed about 250 businesses. And out of that, we understood that they created about 45,000 jobs just amongst the 250,000 businesses. So when you really start talking about the issue of unemployment... Did you say
250,000 or did you say 250?
250 businesses.
Okay, great.
Not 250. And they create 45,000 jobs amongst themselves. So that's already indicating you that this is a real economy that's creating real jobs for people. So, they just need a little bit of, support to be able to be seen and heard. Yeah.
And as far as the recommendations made from the report, can you take us through that? What then is the way forward? How do you provide the support? But also maybe on the flip side of that, if you could highlight some of the challenges that township businesses are facing, as well as the recommendations to tackle those too.
Yeah, so one of the recommendations we found, obviously, they need skills and development. So more than access to finance, people are saying we need training, we need coaching, we need mentorship. It was indicated in the report that township businesses have got an inferior relationships with bank. They feel like banks are difficult to approach. So there is obviously a need for us to become a lot more closer to the people. And also, various things that came out around, how do I access this finance without collateral? People being shy to formalize their businesses. That skepticism of saying, if I formalize, there is a tax implication. So one of the speakers on the panel, Naledzani Mutsumani, mentioned, the issue of people not having access to that knowledge, right? Knowing that, if you are below a certain tax bracket or making a certain level of revenue, you below that revenue level, you don't need to pay tax. So it's not as scary. So, but people don't have that information, and they just even scared to approach relevant people or go where they could get the support. So we want to bring it closer to them.
And how does one access this report?
The report is on BizConnect, on our BizConnect site. If you go to www.standardbank or just type into Google Standard Bank BizConnect site, and then type in the Standard Bank Township Economy Report, you should be able to locate the report.
And what now? These insights have come out, the recommendations have been made. Is Standard Bank going to be positioning itself as that go-to partner for financial partnership for these businesses?
Absolutely. As we've always done, I think we'll continue to form partnerships to be able to solution for businesses in the township. We see huge potential. I mean, we're already doing work, as you would know, our Kasi SME Summit that has just taken place a few months ago, which is a platform which we create to support these businesses. We've got our enterprise and supply development solutions that are targeted specifically for those businesses that lack access to resources. That speaks to how do we train you and coach you and pair you up with somebody that can hold your hand as you grow into your business. And also our Maimo Biz account. So people are complaining about costs from the research, saying the cost of banking is too high. And our Maimo Biz account is only charging costing 9 rand, and that gives you access to a banker that can advise you and support you and walk the journey with you. So therefore, I think it's just for us to become a lot more closer, cement those relationships. And we are in the background, obviously, building solutions aligned with the research findings that we've just discovered.
Lesiba Matladi, a great pleasure speaking with you and wishing you all the best as you continue injecting into township economies and township businesses.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Lesiba Matladi. She's a senior manager for enterprise and supplier development, business and commercial banking at Standard Bank. She brings us to exactly 4:57 Central African time as we say bonjour to you. Joël.
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Merci de rester connectés parce que tout à l'heure nous parlerons sur Vue d'Afrique de Doha. Le gouvernement congolais et l'AFC M23 signent un accord. Et aussi pendant ce temps, l'ex-président Joseph Kabila réunit certains opposants. Nous parlerons également du Cameroun, toujours dans l'attente des résultats de la présidentielle, mais aussi de la présidentielle en Guinée-Bissau. Merci de rester connectés. Merci Thami.
Merci Joël. It's exactly 2 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time. That's how we come to the end of this Tuesday edition of Africa in Business. Thank you to our entire team, Onele Nsinsi on the news and economics desk, Chanduko Likeke, sport, Musubudi Makura, and our production team, Mahbub Buloka, our producer, technical producer Tidimalo Macau, social media talent Butelezi. And I'm Thami Ngubeni. This has been your Tuesday edition of Africa in Business on Channel Africa. You have yourself a splendid afternoon further and restez connectés.